What's up, everyone? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Odd Shopper channel. Today, we're talking a huge college basketball slate. It's Super Tuesday, February the 20th. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We are also brought to you by BetMGM. Limited time offer for you guys that you need to take advantage of if you're in legal states and you haven't already taken advantage of this. What you'll do is click the link in the video description below. Make your first deposit of at least $5. Turn that around, $5 wager on any team, market total, whatever it is you prefer, and you will get $150 in the form of bonus bets. Again, this is for those of you in legal states with the exception of New York, Puerto Rico, and Nevada. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. You must be 21 or older to play in most areas. All right, circling back to yesterday quickly. Good day overall. Did not end up taking Virginia, thank goodness. It did not move quite enough for me to take a position to there, and they had an egregiously bad showing against Virginia Tech on the road. Otherwise, we got a late cover from Iowa State in a awesome defensive matchup if you like that stuff. I know a lot of you are into more of the offensive games, but it was a little greasy, very defensively sound for both teams. Got a little bit up and down at the end of the game. And then some of the grease treated us well. Florida A&M Alcorn went over. Nichols beat New Orleans. All in all, solid Monday night. And we have an epic slate of games tonight. Big slate, marquee games. Creighton plays UConn. The structure of this show will be, we'll talk games that have the most value, and then we'll circle to some of the better games on the slate at the very end and give more of leans. Just for reference, UConn Creighton's not one that I showed a lot of value on, but it's still one I think there is value in talking about. So we'll do those bigger games that don't have as much value at the end for those of you interested. All right, enough housekeeping. Let's dive right in. One game I think that does have a decent amount of value is in the Big East. It's Butler taking on Nova. It's kind of teams that are on two different paths right now. Butler's played a very difficult schedule over the last few games, really the last 3 weeks. You look, since the game they played Nova the first time where they won 88-81. That was at home and it was in overtime. They played a very rigorous strength of schedule. And it's kind of been the opposite for this Nova team who's beaten up on some of the easier teams in the conference. So looking at Butler, they beat Nova, they beat Creighton, they lose to UConn, who almost everyone is right now. They beat Providence, and then they drop a single-digit game to Marquette before getting blown out by Creighton over the weekend in what was a very ugly game. But it's been almost the opposite for Nova. They have the loss to Butler. They lose to Marquette by 5, beat Providence, lose to Xavier, beat Seton Hall without Kadari Richmond, and beat Georgetown. So just the strength of schedule over the last 3 weeks for these teams has been quite different. And I think the efficiency metrics between these two teams indicate the spread should be a little closer. So I'm expecting a slight move likely towards the Butler side. Offensive efficiency, you actually have the better team in Butler. They're better in all the peripheral metrics there. Shooting, effective field goal percentage 123 to 180, which is really surprising considering the player personnel for Nova. This team is 200th in three-point percentage. Justin Moore has just regressed to basically a mid-major level player. He does nothing outside of shoot, and the once 40% three-point shooter has dropped egregiously far, around 30%. And Butler defends that area of the court well anyway. They're 80th, in three-point defense. And on the other side, like Nova's not done a good job scoring inside. They're 167 there. Butler holds an advantage in that area of the court as well, 132 to 167. Didn't mention Butler from three. They're 108th, getting really good minutes out of their guards, especially Posh at the point. And it's not just him. DJ Davis has been awesome from three himself, playing the 2 guard. Pierre Brooks is shooting 41%. And Jaleem Telfort, he's giving them awesome minutes at the 4. They do rotate that 5 position. Jalen Thomas, Andre Scree. That's generally where this Butler team is the weakest. So teams like Creighton can give them trouble when you have like Kalkbrenner on the other side. You don't have that with Nova. They do not have a strong big man that really exploits this matchup. So all in all, it's a lot of points. I think the 6.5 is a completely reasonable number with Butler. Despite playing on the road, you've got the strength of schedule gap here as well. That kind of works Butler's direction. All right, second game up, we'll head to the Big 12. Excuse me, still getting over this sickness a little bit here. UCF takes on West Virginia. A game that you're going to see 3.5s, 3s. I think 3.5s are the number you want to get, but I'm okay if this is a 3 that's on your screen. We've talked about West Virginia a couple times. They're just a team that has played now 3 games at full strength, which is insane to say. UCF has had their problems with injuries as well, but nothing like West Virginia. And the biggest thing here is this West Virginia team has Jesse Edwards back, who is their best player. And he's an interior player, which is really important against UCF. He's a 6'11 senior, has the highest defensive rating on this team. He actually has the highest offensive rating on this team too. And he counteracts really the only thing that UCF does well. UCF is a pathetic shooting team, right on par with West Virginia. You know, like effective field goal percentage, West Virginia actually has an edge, 278 to 280, as crazy as that is. But they're awesome on defense. 18th in 2-point defense. Again, that's UCF. Getting Jesse Edwards back is going to be key to that matchup because this West Virginia team does struggle to score. They have really 2 scorers. Jesse Edwards, that comes in the interior, and then Kirk Kriisa, who's their only 3-point shooter above 40%. That's the matchup that's a little easier to exploit against UCF, who is 128th in 3-point defense, so there's quite a bit of a gap there. But I still think the efficiency metrics, especially on defense for West Virginia, they're not quite where they should be, assuming this team had full health the entire year. And it's not just Kriisa. You had Battle, who's a 2-time waiver transfer clearance midseason. You've had injuries to multiple players. Quinn has missed some games. It's a really tough team to handicap right now because of the small sample with all the players that really they haven't had all season. Meanwhile, UCF, talked about them a little bit, much stronger inside. For their strengths inside on defense, they're pathetic scoring on the inside, 277th there. They're also 262 in 3-point percentage. Believe it or not, West Virginia has about a 60-point gap in 3-point shooting where they have an edge. And aside from that, the only other thing that UCF really does well that scares me is generate turnovers. Kirk Kriisa has not always been the best point guard turnover committed wise, and he actually has the highest turnover rate of his career this season. Some of you may speak to the offense. Some of you may speak to regression coming positively for Kirk Kriisa. I'm not sure what it is, but he is a player that's played limited games and kind of getting his feet under him. So I think there is a little bit of hope that as a veteran now, this guy's a 4-year player, hopefully he can cut down on the turnovers against UCF. If he does so, it is too many points in favor of the road team here. And I mean, you look back to the first matchup, last point, and then we'll move on. West Virginia kept this fairly close. It was only 72-59 in the first game. That was without Jesse Edwards. Now you have your best player back. So I think this is too far in favor of UCF. We'll take a greasy West Virginia side in this game. All right, speaking of greasy, Arkansas takes on Texas A&M. We're just going to look straight to an under. Nothing on the spread. I don't know how you could possibly bet a Texas A&M or bet an Arkansas team right now. This team is egregiously bad. Off-court problems. Look them up. I won't get into it. But this comes down to pacing more than anything else. When you look at these two teams, you've got Arkansas 61st. I don't care how fast they play. This team is egregiously bad on offense. And then you have Texas A&M, who's 319th, and their goal is to slow you down, bring you into these rock fights on defense. And neither of these teams are good at shooting. Arkansas is 227th in effective field goal percentage. Texas A&M somehow is even worse, 341st. Now, they're awesome on the offensive glass. They get a ton of second chance opportunities. And Arkansas is not exactly a great rebounding team, which is shocking considering they do have solid height advantages over everyone. 87th in effective height to A&M's 232. But Brazil's been out. The rebounding edge is vast. Texas A&M is 7th, Arkansas at 235. But at the end of the day, neither team can score here. On the inside, Texas A&M 277, Arkansas 167. From 3, Texas A&M is 358 in 3-point percentage. There's only 4 teams worse at shooting threes than Texas A&M in the entire country. Arkansas is 272. And both of these teams are decent on defense, just to like parallel the offensive egregious numbers versus defense. And defense, Arkansas 102 on the interior, Texas A&M 75. From 3, neither team defends this area all that well. It's middling for both teams. But again, the 3-point percentage is so bad that I'm not sure either team really has success in this area of the court either. So, I mean, you can find 146.5 right now. Pacing hasn't really changed for either of these two teams throughout the year. So I think this is one we can pretty clearly take towards the under at 146.5. Next up, we'll return to the Big 12. Baylor takes on BYU. This one, expecting it to move. BYU, the home team, one of the best home court advantages in college basketball. And I rarely talk about this, but they play at elevation. And Baylor's on a nasty road trip right now. So you've got weird travel stuff for Baylor. They just played away at West Virginia in Morgantown, which is essentially a cross-country trip for this team. And that was on Saturday. So Saturday, Morgantown. Tuesday, you're in Provo at elevation. Pretty nasty. They're also not healthy. Langston Love has not played in multiple games. They've been calling him day-to-day. It's a lower body injury. I don't think he plays. And in the first matchup of these two teams, I believe he had 15 points. Pretty good showing from Langston Love. Without him, they're just not quite as deep. He's their sixth man. And BYU should be fully healthy here. Briefly touched on their first game. BYU did lose. It was an 81-72 game. It was on the road. They shot 37.5% from three, which is decent. It's a little bit below their average. But they had 14 turnovers compared to Baylor's 5. And I think as long as you clean that up, this game is much closer. You look at like defensive ratings for this team. Losing Langston Love's not going to help just depth-wise. But BYU a little healthier this time of year. And they do a lot of things well that Baylor also does. And honestly, I think just a little bit better, especially on the defensive end. Like BYU is 51st, Baylor's 91st. You look at interior defense. BYU's 99th, Baylor's 224. There's really no excuse for this. Baylor's actually a little taller in terms of effective height, 21 versus 46. But then from three, BYU's 32, Baylor's 141. So you have these massive gaps on defense. Well, what does offense look like? BYU's actually the better interior scoring team, 7th versus Baylor's 47. And then from three, it's Baylor's awesome at shooting threes. They're first. BYU is 91st. And this is a big problem for BYU at times. They live and die by the three. They're 4th in three-point rate. If they don't hit their threes, a lot of times they're just cooked. But the benefit here is that Baylor doesn't defend this area of the court well. Again, outside the top 140 in three-point defense, BYU should have no problem getting up threes, and they should meet little resistance in this area. And if they do meet resistance, you always have that interior matchup, which is far weaker and easier to exploit, that they can just pound on the inside. So, I mean, there's plenty of advantages here aside from the situational spot, which is just brutal for Baylor in this game. So, to me, it sets up pretty well in favor of BYU. And just looking at this team, I mean, shooters for days, you got 3 players of at least 38% downhaul, Waterman, Trevin Nell, a couple players just below that. And again, they're going to shoot a ton of threes in this game. Has a real chance to get up and down, and they're playing on their home court. So we'll back BYU. One that might be a little lower normally, but I've just grouped the Power 6 games together before we get to, there's a bunch of MAC games we'll talk about. Those are going to be fun. Syracuse takes on NC State. I like an under here. It's scary. And the real reason it's scary is pacing. First and foremost, on the year, you've got Syracuse 40th. You've got NC State 122nd. Recently, Syracuse is 44th, but NC State has jumped to 87th in tempo. The reason the under still comes in for me is just these teams are so bad at shooting. Effective field goal percentage, Syracuse is 212th. NC State is 208th. Neither team can shoot. The first time these teams played, Syracuse won 77-65 at home. That game played to a 142 total. Both teams shot horribly, but again, that's not an anomaly for these two teams. On the inside, Syracuse 153, NC State 190th. And NC State's very good at defending this area of the court. Syracuse does not really have any bodies on the inside, but that's not where NC State scores. From three, Syracuse 262, NC State 200th. Neither of these teams shoot threes well. It's going to be a pretty fast tempo game. Both teams are getting up and down, but both these teams are significantly better on defense than offense. 46 and 61 are the defensive efficiency metrics, where you have two teams hovering around the top 100, and Syracuse is significantly outside of that on offense. So I'm not really worried about the tempo in this game. You already saw this play well below the 151.5 total that we previously saw. So I think we can pretty confidently go under this. If for whatever reason, either of these teams slow it, you're looking at a pretty strong under position for this game. Teased it a little bit. We've got a lot of MAC games. We'll kick things off with Akron taking on Toledo. This is one where we'll back a road team. There's a couple of road teams I like in the MAC. There's some home teams mixed in. So those of you home court bros, do not fret. We'll have some home teams. But first and foremost, pretty big gap in talent for these two teams, I think. Akron has been playing without Nate Johnson. He's really the only key absence in the game. He's a 40% from three shooter, but Akron has a lot of really good players in this team, so it's not a huge loss. Akron did win this game previously. It was a 77-70 game. They played that game at home. It was on Groundhog's Day. Both these teams are pretty good at shooting. You have Akron coming in 104th in effective field goal. Toledo is 57th. The real gap you see between these teams is on defense, where Akron is 77th and Toledo is 292. And I think Akron is just the more complete team. Effective height, Toledo's 317. They play a tiny lineup. Akron is 208. And Akron has the best player in this country, or in this conference, not the country. That would be wild to consider Enrique Freeman the best player in the country. But anyway, Enrique Freeman is the best player in this conference. EvanMia.com is a place you can go to take a look at Bayesian performance ratings for players in this conference. And he's going to play in the front court. Generally playing the 4, sometimes playing the 5, depends on Sammy Hunter being in the lineup or not. But Enrique Freeman, 6'7", most efficient player in the conference. Sammy Hunter, 6'9". That gives them a very big edge in the front court. It's evidenced in effective height, evidenced in rebounding, 48th versus 174th. Also evidenced on interior scoring. Akron is 35th. Toledo is they're 360th in interior defense. The number's staggering. 2 teams worse than Toledo at defending the paint. And from there, it's not like this team is bad at shooting threes. They shoot a lot of them. And Toledo is 277 defending that area of the court as well. Just a terrible defense from Toledo. They're a complete shootout team, and they need to shoot the ball over to you to win these games. The problem is in this matchup, this Toledo team, which is awesome at shooting threes, 19th in three-point percentage, faces the strength of Akron's defense, which is 27th in three-point percentage allowed. So you've got these two mismatches. Akron stacks up well against the three-point shooting of Toledo, and they have a massive mismatch on the inside with Enrique Freeman. And Sammy Hunter's solid too. We haven't even talked about Ali, who's a 6'8" senior for this team. 2-time transfer was cleared. He's more of a glue guy, doesn't do anything well, does draw a lot of fouls, but this guy's going to play 35 minutes for your team, and he's a veteran with size that Toledo just doesn't have. So it's going to be an Akron side. I'm a little surprised this is a +2. I thought it would be closer to a pick 'em, so one will happily take with the Zips. Remaining in this conference, as we will for a bit here, Kent State takes on Ohio. This is one where, like a home team with the Bobcats, another game that's already been played, basically all rematches at this point in the league play for the MAC. Only absence, A.J. Brown's been missing time for Ohio. He's only played in 9 games. He's a pretty meh player to begin with. And there's a pretty sizable gap in talent in this matchup. Ohio has 3 players in the top 11. One of them, Miles Brown, has only played in 16 games. So I think there's a little meat left on the bone for these efficiency metrics on the Ohio side. Ohio already won this matchup, 71-64. That was on the road on January 26th. Vast gaps in a lot of metrics. Effective field goal, Ohio is 70. Kent State is 141. You can dive a little deeper yet. This Ohio team is better size, 217 to Kent State's 347. That's evidenced in interior scoring, where you have a similar matchup to the previous contest. Ohio's 100. Kent State is 303 defending that area. Both these teams shoot threes well. Ohio 68th, Kent State 55. The only problem is this Kent State team, that's all they do well, whereas Ohio, they come at you with a balanced attack. And then Kent State does win through generating a lot of turnovers. You can look at the defensive metrics for this team. You do see Kent State pretty far ahead, 207 versus 279 in overall efficiency. A lot of this metric is driven by their turnovers force, which they are 60th in the country there. But this Ohio team is excellent point guard play. They're only 14th in turnovers committed. That's a top 15 team at just handling the ball in the entire country. Yes, they play in the MAC, but you can't schedule adjust. So that's a problem as well. You have Jalen Hunter. He's a senior. He takes care of the ball extremely well. One of the lowest turnover rates in the entire country. And when you need to spell him, you have Miles Brown, Sharif Mitchell. It's a very balanced Ohio team. Not to mention, this team has good shooters. Clayton's at 40% from three. Miles Brown's at 41%. They're well balanced, really everywhere. Score inside and out. Another one, I'm very surprised the spread is within 3 points. So we'll happily back the Bobcats in a game they already showed they have the capabilities of winning, and they did so on the road. Next matchup, this one I think is pretty strong. Miami, Ohio takes on Western Michigan, who's at the bottom of this conference. It's not particularly close. Really, every single efficiency metric points Miami, Ohio's direction. This team's also way healthier now. They've had multiple players miss time this year, including their best player, Anderson Mirambo. They have 5 players in the top 30 of this conference. Western Michigan only has 1. The only real question I have with this game is we did see it play already, and we did see Western Michigan win. That was a long time ago. It was January 2nd, and sometimes things like this happen in the MAC. You just have flukes. But, man, every single efficiency metric points to Miami, Ohio. This team is 109th in effective field goal. Western Michigan, 268th. Absolute disaster shooting the ball. This Miami, Ohio team is 42nd in three-point percentage, and they're 52nd defending that area of the court. Western Michigan does try to get up a lot of threes. They're not good at it, 272nd in three-point percentage, which I find interesting. But what they try to do is exactly where Miami, Ohio defends well. The only real edge I think Western has is with their height. They're 81st. Miami, Ohio, 252. That shows up in rebounding. But for whatever reason, these players are bad on offense on the inside. 245th in interior scoring. Again, they don't play through their front court. They try to shoot threes. So that's a problem in this matchup as well. At the 1.5, I know it's a road team in the MAC, but I think one we can confidently back in this spot. All right, last MAC team we'll talk about before we get to an A-10 matchup and some of the bigger games. Ball State takes on Northern Illinois. This is one where we'll back a road team here too. Northern Illinois just hasn't been healthy this year, and I don't think they're healthy yet. Philmon Gebruit, the DePaul transfer, hasn't played in multiple games. Their best player, Keyshawn Williams, has only played in 1 contest. I guess if you exclude him, Gebruit is their best player. And aside from him, David Coit ranks the highest on evanmedia.com's Bayesian performance rating. He's 49th. You have 4 players ranked higher than that on Ball State. The only guy they've missed is Mickey Pearson, and I think he's going to play in this game. He warmed up in their last contest, just didn't take the floor. Another spot where you have almost every efficiency metric looking Ball State's direction. Ball State beat Northern Illinois 81-71 on their home court. That was on January 27th. For some of the stylistic stuff, height is very close for these two teams, 139 to 105. For whatever reason, Northern Illinois has not used their height. They don't rebound well at all. 292 versus 136 for Ball State. Ball State's excellent shooting the ball. 125th in effective field goal versus 206 for Northern Illinois. This team shoots threes really well. They're 19th in the country, three-point percentage. Northern Illinois, 338th, defending that area of the floor. Just some pretty stark differences for these two teams. +1 is really surprising to me. So one to happily take in this spot. Last road team we'll back here. Promise you this. VCU takes on UMass. I'm not really sure what the line movement is going through here. VCU is about a 1.5 point favorite at open, underdog, and UMass is taking money. So now VCU's moved from 1.5 to 3.5. I understand Matt Cross is back in the fold for this UMass team, but he's really the only player they have. He's their only player in the top 15 of this conference. VCU is 3 of them, and VCU also dealt with a lot of injury problems. They've now returned to full health. Sean Barstow's back for this team. He gives them size at 6'8", and this team is pretty good with just their efficiency metrics. They're a better shooting team than what we see from UMass. 94th in effective field goal to 158. They're really good at defending inside. They're 29th. That's basically all UMass can do is score inside with Matt Cross. They're 83rd scoring there. Getting Barstow back helps. He's just a big player. And then VCU has pretty stark shooting advantages. 42nd in three-point rate, 55th in three-point percentage. UMass is 260th defending that area of the floor. The only real advantage I see UMass's direction is they do force a lot of turnovers, which VCU has struggled with at times. But there's a couple other areas that kind of counteract this. UMass gets in foul trouble incessantly. VCU does generate a ton of them. It's just a lot of points for a team that has better shooters, has a clear path to victory, and I think has some answers inside for Matt Cross now that you've got like Bear still back in the fold. So that's a little bit interesting to me, one that we can take, I think, at least a look at. All right, big games to close out here. These are ones I do have interest in betting if you can find the better numbers. So I'll just speak to Odd Shopper quickly, the sponsor of this channel, the name of the channel. Click the link in the video description below, and you can take a look at this. What it does is gives you the ability to sort by state, sort by book, whatever you use. It's highly customizable. It's going to find the best lines for you, which makes a massive difference to your bottom line at the end of the year. And we also have a bunch of tools, industry-leading tools that are constantly changing and improving. We use a market-based approach to find plus EV spots across sports, which I like using for other sports. Not an expert in everything. NBA, PGA, all this stuff going on right now. There's tools for it. And our Discord's now included. It's $14.95 for a week, $49.95 for a month. No long-term commitments. Check it out. I think it's going to help you a lot in your process. All right, we've got Creighton and UConn. UConn a 3-point favorite. Really, I just can't take anyone against UConn right now. They're fresh off just a beatdown of Marquette over the weekend. Creighton kind of did the same to Butler, but we've seen these teams play already. UConn held Creighton to 48 points. 48 points from Creighton. I actually like Creighton quite a bit, but almost every single thing they do well, UConn does better. Kalkbrenner on the inside, neutralized by Klingon. Klingon, 7'2", moves his feet well. Kalkbrenner rarely fouls, but he's also not aggressive. Like, I don't see him drawing fouls on Klingon. Guard play, Creighton has awesome guards. I love Trey Alexander, Baylor Shireman. He had a triple-double in their second most recent game. Like, these guys are awesome. You just seed size and you seed athleticism. Like Stephen Ashworth being on the floor, he cannot compete with players like Stephon Castle, Tristan Newton. Even, at like the 4 position, having Caravan versus the revolving door of Farabello and Miller. The roster's just better. I do show slight value on Creighton. I just cannot possibly bet against UConn right now. And the last thing I'll say is UConn's efficiency metrics. What are the chances they're leaving something on the bone? You missed Klingon for about a month. Castle didn't play at the beginning of the year. Caravan's missed a few games. I mean, this team might be historically good. I truly cannot tell you or evaluate this team effectively right now until we get a bigger sample of them at full health. But last thing I'll say is I just will not bet against UConn right now. They will be stayaways unless they show value themselves. San Diego State, Utah State. This is a fun one in the Mountain West, a pivotal game in this conference. As you can see, both teams had 20 wins and kind of jockeying for seeding. I think San Diego State is the value at 2.5. I would likely take them if this went to 3.5, something in that range. Utah State has the better shooting metrics, and that makes sense just looking at this team. They're 45th in effective field goal. San Diego State is 133, but Utah State really has to score inside. They're 13th, and San Diego State does defend that area of the floor well. They're 123. San Diego State has comparable effective height numbers. Jaden Ledee is giving them awesome minutes inside. And then if this does turn into a shooting match, shockingly, San Diego State has better numbers. They're 213th in three-point percentage. Utah State is 299th. And then some of the peripheral stuff, rebounding is very close. San Diego State does force way more turnovers, 68th in turnovers forced to Utah State's 190th. I think all this kind of comes out in the home court, which is why I don't think it's bettable right now. But if it were to move any further, would have some interest on the San Diego State side. So at least want to briefly mention this game. TCU, Texas Tech. You're going to find TCU as about a 5-point underdog, 5.5 point. I think this game would have a lot more interest if we had news on Warren Washington for Texas Tech. They don't exactly play the biggest lineup. They're not small either. But you dive into the Texas Tech roster, they will be seeding size. They're already 198th in effective height. TCU's 86th. Washington missed their game over the weekend with a foot injury, and he had previously missed with an injury an illness. So I'm not sure what to make of this. Having really Robert Jennings as your only player inside scares me against TCU. That's why it's going to be a stay away. I actually do like the guard play for Texas Tech a lot more, and I think they have advantages there. They're 33rd in three-point percentage, getting awesome point guard play out of Pop Isaacs. Just can't take it if there's going to be this massive mismatch on the inside without Warren Washington. So I think that's kind of the crux of the game. If you were to find he's warming up and the line's still sitting at like a 5 or something, you could look at Texas Tech. Conversely, if he's out and it's around a 5, maybe TCU is the value. Last one up, Pitt and Wake Forest. This is just a super fun game in the ACC. A couple teams sitting on the bubble. I hope one of them gets in because I love both these teams. The spread is 6.5 in favor of Wake, and that was the team I was looking to take in this game, but it's just a little too far. We know what Wake does, 40th in effective field goal versus Pitt's 149th. Wake has the snipers from 3, and they have so many of them. Monsanto, just to name one, but this team is 40th in three-point percentage. The problem is Pitt defends that area of the floor really well. They're 15th in three-point defense, and both these teams are tall. Wake can win inside. They're actually, as long as Efton Reed doesn't foul, this is another strength of this team, 9th in effective height. But Pitt is 17th. The only thing I'll say is I do think you lack some skill down there for Pitt. They're 176th in interior defense. Again, it's tough, though, because Efton Reed is one of the highest foul rates in the country. If he goes down with fouls, you could be looking at something similar to, I don't know, the Duke game where he just couldn't stay on the floor and this team couldn't play without him, which was tough. He played 15 minutes in that game. He actually played really well against Filipkowski, but off the floor, Duke just took advantage. So it's kind of, I think, a Waker pass, but we'll see where the line goes throughout the day. I'll tweet it if there's something actionable later in the day. But that'll do it for us. Thank you guys for watching. Much appreciated. If you have any comments, please leave them below. And I'm on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. DMs are open if you'd like to reach out throughout the day. Happy to answer anything that might come up. Otherwise, good luck. We'll be back tomorrow and the rest of the week, wall-to-wall content. Until then, good luck, everyone. We'll see you later.